Good afternoon. The Information Policy Census and National Archives Subcommittee on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee will now come to order. Without objection, the chair and ranking minority member will have 5 minutes to make opening statements, followed by opening statements not to exceed 3 minutes by any other member who seeks recognition. And without objection, members and witnesses may have 5 legislative days to submit a written statement or extraneous materials for the record. Welcome to today's hearing, a review of agency use under the Federal Records Act of Web 2.0 technologies. As a result of today's hearing, we will have an understanding of what is meant by Web 2.0 in the federal government, recognize the federal records management implications of these technologies, and appreciate what areas of Web 2.0 may merit further examination by the committee. To that end, we have invited 3 government witnesses who are experts in these fields, including the Archivists of the United States. It is good to see you again, Archivist Ferriero. Web 2.0 technologies make possible interactive collaboration and enhanced information sharing, allowing large groups of users to participate in content creation. Federal agencies have embraced Web 2.0 for both external and internal applications to promote transparency, collaboration, and participation. Agencies must continue to manage content created via Web 2.0 applications under the Federal Records Act and in compliance with the National Archives and Records Administration guidance, which is why I have invited the archivists to testify today. The GSA is leading executive branch efforts to identify and develop Web 2.0 platforms for agencies to use. Therefore, we will hear today from the Associate Administrator of GSA's Office of Citizen Services and Innovative Technologies. Several months ago, I requested the GAO review the management and protection of information collected and maintained by commercial providers of federal social media services. While they have only just begun that engagement, I have invited GAO's Director of Information Security Issues here today. It is my hope that during today's hearing, part 1 in a series of hearings of Web 2.0, we can remain focused on the subject at hand and not become distracted by issues outside of the scope of this hearing and even outside of the jurisdiction of this subcommittee. There have been media reports that this hearing will be used for a showdown with the administration over issues unrelated to the federal records implications of Web 2.0. Indeed, unrelated to Web 2.0 completely. If true, this is troubling. A congressional oversight hearing should be where important issues are thoroughly examined and not a showdown. Also, Rule 15 of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform expressly requires that all questions put to witnesses before the committee shall be relevant to the subject matter before the committee for consideration. I want to make sure that we use this committee's valuable time and resources appropriately. This Congress has been very active in oversight of federal as well as presidential records. I am an original co-sponsor of the first bill passed by the House in this session, H.R. 35, the Presidential Records Act Amendments of 2009. Not every member of the subcommittee voted for this important bill, and I continue to hope that the Senate will move forward and pass this legislation. If there is specific, creditable evidence that any federal agency is not properly managing federal records, we will examine that, and I am always open to suggestions from all members of this committee for relevant topics for future hearings. But it is more important to talk about the subject at hand an issue that affects all agencies in broad and diverse ways than to spend valuable subcommittee time making political points on a very different issue. In any case, this hearing is about Web 2.0 and particularly the federal records implications of these technologies. And I hope that everyone understands that and will confine their question to the subject matter of this hearing. As a final point, I want to clear up some confusion about today's hearing. There's continuing controversy about an old story. That is, whether an administration official used his personal email account in violation of the Presidential Records Act. First, the official, Mr. McLaughlin, is employed by the White House of Science and Technology Policy. While this is an entity in the executive office of the President, that office is not subject to the Presidential Records Act. The Office of Science and Technology Policy is subject to the Federal Records Act. In addition, his incidental use of a personal email account for government business is not and of itself a violation of the Federal Records Act, which governs his records. The individual simply needs to make sure that the record gets into the proper record-keeping system. And that's what happened. In fact, the issue that the White House examined, dealt with, and closed was not about any records statutes. It was about incidental contact with the official's former employer prohibited not by law, but by an ethics pledge. The White House dealt with the matter, and it is now closed. And now we shall move forward to the subject of today's hearing. I now yield to my colleague, the subcommittee ranking minority member, Mr. McHenry of North Carolina, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, before I make an opening statement, I'd like to record some of my concerns about this hearing. There was a hearing, this hearing was originally scheduled for June 24th, and among the witnesses that were invited to the June 24th hearing was Ms. Beth Simone Noveck, the Deputy Chief Technology Officer of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. So the fact that the chairman is saying that it's not, that we don't have oversight over that, it's perplexing to me that that he had this very witness on the previous hearing that was canceled. So in advance of the originally scheduled hearing, Ranking Member Issa spoke publicly of his intention to question Ms. Noveck about the use of personal email to conduct official business in the Office of Science and Technology. Ms. Noveck shares an office with Andrew McLaughlin, a former Google lobbyist the chairman references in his opening statement, turned administration official who used his personal email account to communicate with more than 25 Google employees, including influential lobbyists and lawyers. Mr. McLaughlin also used his Gmail address, his webmail address, to communicate with senior members of the Obama administration. This use of personal email violates the President's ethics pledge and federal law. And I do think those two together, separately and together, are very important things. Federal ethics pledge from the President, as well as federal law. And yet the White House refuses to answer questions from Republican members of this committee about how the problem is fixed. Interestingly enough, this witness was dropped before today's hearing in anticipation of this line of questioning. Within days of Ranking Member Issa's public statements about his intentions to question Ms. Noveck about this incident, the hearing was canceled. Today, we're holding this hearing without a White House witness. Without being able to ask questions to a White House witness, our members are being deprived of answers about a very disturbing trend in the administration. On top of Mr. McLaughlin's use of his personal email to circumvent the Presidential Records Act and even the Federal Records Act, the New York Times reported on June 24th that White House staffers regularly meet with lobbyists at a Caribou Coffee across the street from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Because the discussions are not taking place at the White House, they're not subject to disclosure on the visitor's log that the White House releases as part of its pledge to be the most, quote, the most transparent presidential administration in history. It's important for this subcommittee's purposes that we're provided the opportunity to question relevant witnesses and to conduct proper oversight of, on our concerns related to the extraordinary lengths the White House staffers are going to avoid having their communications captured by the Presidential Records Act and the Federal Records Act. Not having a White House witness present to testify at this hearing undermines the purposes of this hearing and prevents us from doing our job of conducting oversight of this issue. So, under House Rule 11, Clause 2K sets forth hearing procedures to be followed by the House committee and subcommittees. Clause 2KS of House Rule 11 states that, quote, the chair shall receive and the subcommittee shall dispose of requests to subpoena additional witnesses. Pursuant to that rule, Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee authorize and issue a subpoena to compel the testimony of Miss Beth Simone Noveck or another White House official with the Office of Science and Technology Policy qualified to testify on her behalf. Mr. Chairman, there's a motion.
Address the motion at another time.
Mr. Chairman, I demand a recorded vote. Ask for a recorded vote on this motion
We will
at this time.
at this time. Well, we will recess. Committee stands in recess.
Okay, so we're happy to wait.